All right, so hello and welcome to another fabulous Friday edition of AP United States History. How's everybody doing? It's spring, almost. Okay, I was corrected on this by Mr. Shalek. I said happy vernal equinox, and he said not till 3:45.
Oh. He's very precise. It looks like he really is.
Yeah. So I was, so I've been schooled. So, all right.
Whatever.
Did we even have? I did. So, anyway, so. Last couple times we have talked about the civil rights movement in the United States, and what was kind of eclipsed by that movement was that there were other groups that were also not being treated equitably in American society. And so how I want to start out today is to talk about some of the other groups that were trying to get the same equity, or to get equity in American society at this point in the 1960s, and then we'll, when we get to the 1970s next week, we will revisit these topics. Okay. So the first group that, and we had talked a little bit about this when we talked about the Mendez case and how there had been segregation in schools here in California, and how the Mendez versus Westminster case had helped influence the Brown versus Board of Education case. But the biggest issue facing Mexican-American citizens in the United States was income. So it was a huge money inequity. The median income for Mexican-Americans in the United States was about 62% of what the general population made on average. So much of the early movement is based upon trying to take the industries that were, which were traditionally, the laborers were traditionally Mexican American, to make them, to organize them, basically to raise the wages. And so two people that were very instrumental in this were Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, who basically met when they worked for the Latino Civil Rights Community Service Organization. They will also be the co-founders of the United Farm Workers. The major achievement of the United Farm Workers was a great strike in 1970 here in California, which was also supported by a consumer boycott. What this strike and boycott will do is force agricultural growers here in California to bargain collectively. And I think I've talked about this as being kind of a ticket to many things in the United States, and so many benefits in our society, like healthcare and whatnot, you can only get through union contracts because we don't have like a national health care system. Bargaining collectively is sometimes the key to being able to get basic services in your life. This will eventually lead to a California law which will make it so that agricultural growers must bargain collectively. They must allow there to be collective bargaining. At the same time, there was something which might have been more akin to a rights movement. Mexican American youth wanted reform more quickly. In other words, while some people were concentrating on that monetary issue, what's getting left behind is the rights issue. And you can kind of see why. I mean, people sometimes, and the first thing you're going to think of is basically surviving. And whereas other people are saying, well, besides surviving, what about our rights? And so, very much like what we talked about the Black Panther Party being created last time. We would see the emergence of movements like the Brown Berets. Perhaps the most dramatic movement still in the 1960s for this movement would happen in Denver in 1969, when basically a name is proclaimed, that where Mexican Americans start to proclaim themselves to be Chicanos. This will also lead to the formation of a political party, La Raza Unida. The second group will be the rebirth of the women's movement. Basically, in the 1960s, as we see an increase in liberal reform, and we're going to talk more about this in class today, the women's movement kind of gets reawakened. Notable in this was a woman by the name of Betty Friedan. Betty Friedan basically indicted or attacked on the way that society had created this cult of domesticity in the 1950s. And so basically what she attacks is that thinking of women only in this role. Her book, The Feminine Mystique, in effect will launch the modern women's movement. Just before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a presidential commission on the status of women will basically look at women in the workplace. And what this commission will determine was that indeed there was a great deal of discrimination as far as pay, as far as job titles, as far as jobs that women could not even get in the American workplace. And so what ends up happening is that even though President Kennedy had initially made the Civil Rights Act largely to deal with concerns of African Americans, this commission determines that when we make this act, more people need to be covered. And so when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is added, is passed, there will be additional language added covering gender and discrimination based on gender. So that is Betty Friedan. And in 1966, Betty Friedan will be one of the co-founders of what is known as the National Organization for Women, or NOW. This organization will end up being one of the pivotal organizations for the movement that will develop in the 1970s, basically known as the feminist movement. The main topic today, and the way that I had kind of imagined that was positioning the last two topics was up against the major movement that we were talking about last time. And one of the things that I kind of I'm going to want you to do is is be able to make some mental comparisons of all of the different rights movements that emerged in this era. We're going to get more information, however, as we get into the 1970s. Okay? So the next part of our kind of our study of the 60s is basically kind of what happens to what you might call the liberal movement or the liberal era in United States history. If you think of the election of 1932, the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his creation of the New Deal coalition. This brings forward a kind of a liberal era in the United States, an era in which government is thought to be the answer, that government might be able to fix the problems and issues in our lives. Well, in the 1960s, this idea is challenged, okay? And what kind of happens is we're going to end up with an era which this liberal era is going to kind of hit its peak, and then it's going to kind of crash. And by the end of the 1960s, we're going to start to see a shift in American politics toward conservatism.
Boo.
Okay. Yeah, but it's a thing.
Yeah, I know.
All right. So we'll start with liberalism at high tide. And when you're thinking of liberalism at high tide, let's talk about the election of 1960. Okay. And in 1960, John F. Kennedy defeats Richard Nixon. Okay. And becomes the youngest person ever elected president. Now, remember, I think I gave you the Jeopardy warning, right? Okay? So the Jeopardy warning is this. When Mr. DeBeck asks you, well, I guess he doesn't ask you the question. He gives you the answer, and then you have to ask the question. But if the answer to the question is the youngest president, the question is, who is Theodore Roosevelt? If the answer to the question is the youngest person elected president, the question is, who is JFK? Okay, tricky people. Those Jeopardy question writers. Okay. 43. So TR was 42, and JFK is 43.
35, right?
You legally have to be 35. It's one of the, there's not a lot of actual job requirements, but one of the job requirements is 35. Basically, it's assuming that you have to have had a little bit of experience in life, okay? Okay? Yeah.
How old did you say you were?
Oh, to be president?
No, how old was he?
He was 43. And you have to be born in the United States. But the definition of that is still under a little bit of scrutiny because there are people who can be born American citizens, not actually here. We haven't quite tested it yet. Okay?
It's true. It's true. The Crown has made it clear. The climate must be perfect all the year. A law was made a distant moon ago here. July and August cannot be too hot. And there's a legal limit to the snow here in Camelot.
Okay, so the election of Kennedy for many just seemed to be so magical. And he looked gorgeous, his wife looked gorgeous, and basically it just seemed like a fairy tale. So they called it Camelot. Okay. So Kennedy is sworn in 1963. In his inauguration speech, he gives us a very famous line, okay? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And, well, maybe, but the way that it was received is that young people had never really been asked to be part of the thing before, okay? Young people had always been the ones that were left out, okay? Young people were the people that were not considered. And what Kennedy did is he expressly turned to young people and said, what are you gonna do? Okay, that's what the message was here. And that was part of the magic, okay, if that makes sense.
We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change.
Oh yeah. So, Boston. Was he from Boston? Yes, he's from Boston. Okay. Anyway, so Kennedy, glamorous, full of vitality, though that's really the public image. He was actually fairly sickly. He had Addison's disease, but that was under the table. He will make a promise to get the nation moving again. This is kind of a smack on who had been president before him. You had old guy. You had the oldest president to that time ever elected, who had had heart attacks and was always going off and playing golf, okay? And what Kennedy's saying is, oh no, we need action. We need to do stuff. Okay, and he proposes a new frontier. As I was kind of stating a moment ago, part of his charm, part of his magic, was that he challenged the youth, okay, to high expectations. He put out there even programs that young people could do, how they could serve immediately. He proposes the creating of the Peace Corps, so that Americans could go out into the world and help underdeveloped nations. Okay, and if you actually look around in the faculty here at Pali High, we have several former Peace Corps people on our faculty. Okay, part of that new frontier. Okay, he is going to say, well, you know, the Soviet Union might have put that thing in orbit first. The Soviet Union might have put a person in orbit first, okay? Maybe they are ahead of us in rocketry right now, but I'll tell you what, we are going to beat them to the moon. We are going to put a person on the moon by the end of this decade. This program, a multi-billion-dollar project, will end up adding stimulus to the American economy because we're now going to go all in to get somebody to the moon. However, as much as he had wanted to do, when you look at the final scorecard on John F. Kennedy, and you might just say the final scorecard, you might give him an incomplete because he did not get to complete his term, okay? But when you look at the final scorecard on what wanted to get done versus got done, and you're going to find that there's a lot of not got dones. His programs were largely hurt by the conservative coalition, which particularly start blocking things as soon as he starts talking about civil rights. And as you know from last time, the reason why he gets that grade of incomplete is because of being assassinated in 1963. However, in a weird way, his assassination only helped increase the mystique and the mysticism and the magic. Because it becomes so much of a what could it have been, if that makes sense. And then just kind of last point on this, I think I mentioned this last time, but it's worth repeating. Gallup did a poll after the assassination, and what the poll asked was very simple, yes/no question, or a very simple, who did you vote for? And it was, who did you vote for in the election of 1960? And the thing is that he barely won. But when people were self-reporting who they voted for in the wake of the assassination, 75% of the American people said they voted for him. Okay? You get that? All right. So, Lyndon Baines Johnson is then sworn in as President of the United States. Okay? And if you basically are going to get your kind of your background on Lyndon Johnson, he started his career as a liberal in Texas.
And that part of his career ended extraordinarily fast. Once he started saying, "Hey, I'm for civil rights in Texas," they peeked, "No, we don't do that here." So he learned, okay, to basically take his liberalism and put it in the closet. Okay, so in effect, for the next decade plus, he is a closet liberal. Okay, all right. Successfully obscuring how liberal he was, he will win in a quote landslide for the Senate in 1948. Now, the reason why it's in quotes is A, it actually wasn't a landslide, and very likely it wasn't even a win. The amazing thing about the vote for Lyndon Johnson in 1948 was the number of dead people that voted for him. He absolutely secured the zombie vote. Because basically, when they went back and looked over the voting record, all these people that were already dead had managed to make it to the polls and vote in this election. Okay, all right? Because he was awesome like that. Yes.
Did they find out if LBJ was responsible for it? Or?
Very likely would have been he was. This is back when things were under the control of machines, and the machines did it. But obviously, was he in cahoots with the machine? Well, he probably made some promises to the machine in order to get elected. Not sure if he would have known exactly what they would do to get him elected, but he certainly would have made promises to the machine in order to get elected. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So when he was elected, when they went back to see who voted for him, I thought everything was closed, poll, and nothing.
Everything's done. So this is afterwards. It's all. This is just people looking back at the records. Okay. So after, let's check the. This is odd. Anyway, what Johnson immediately shows a skill for in the Senate is he is a wheeler dealer. Okay, if you want something done, you got Johnson on board, and it got done. He will do something with the United States Senate which actually had never been done up until he became Senate Majority Leader. You see, the Senate Majority Leader had a power, okay, granted to it. Senate Majority Leader was given the power to give committee assignments and chairmanships. Okay? But until Johnson became Senate Majority Leader, the way that the job was done was basically like a mentor D. Oh, you are the most senior person in the United States Senate. Oh, and what committee assignments would you like? Oh, very good choice, fabulous. And would you like a chairmanship with that? Oh, good. Fabulous, you are now the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Okay, so basically, the way that it was done, traditionally, was that it would just recognize everybody's seniority and just dispense things according to their seniority. When he became Senate Majority Leader, it became, well, a minute, so I have the power to appoint someone to a committee and give chairmans. Okay, so how are you feeling about the Civil Rights Act of 1957? What's your vote going to be? No? So you don't want to be on the Ways and Means Committee? Oh, that would be so sad. So what was that vote again? Do you see the difference? Okay, he would wield that power as a power, And he basically started to send the Senate into a direction by party, whereas they had always kind of considered themselves to be above party. It was like the herding cats type of thing. Okay. Yeah.
In terms of the committee,
Mhm.
isn't it now based on seniority?
It is based on seniority, but appointments are still actually done by. Does that make sense? So now, how much power someone is willing to use in that situation or not is dependent upon who the majority leader is. He has a power, okay, but is he willing to use it? Does that make sense?
No, the senator.
Okay.
Head of this.
Yeah, all right. So, this is just an add-on just to make sure that you kind of knew how all of a sudden he became president of the United States, is that he ran with Kennedy as vice president in 1960. Now here's the funny thing, is that during the campaign, he was chosen as the Southern conservative to balance out the liberal Yankee, okay? That's why he is on the ticket. And so all of a sudden when he starts talking, he says, but this is what I believe. Kennedy says, shut up. You're not supposed to say those things. You're supposed to be the Southern conservative. Okay, do that, if that makes sense. So this is staged, but it was staged, but it was meant to show off what he did. He was a big guy, and he used his big guyness to his advantage, okay? I'm not sure if you've ever had anybody use their presence on you, okay? But that's, that's what he did, okay? Okay? Right? Okay? So, in 1964, by this time, it has become very apparent to the world that he is not a Southern conservative. Okay? As president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, in effect, comes out of the closet as a liberal. Okay? And he will, as president, start saying that we have problems. This country needs to fix them. We could have a great society. But to do it, we need to fix our problems of poverty. There are too many poor people in the United States. We need to make sure that poor people are taken care of. And so he basically starts making proposals that were very similar to what FDR had done during the New Deal, except we're not in a depression. Okay, FDR's doing it because we're in a depression. LBJ's doing it because there are just too many poor people in the United States. And we need to fix that. Well, in 1964, the Republican Party is going to have kind of a rebellion within. The Republican Party at that time was split, okay? There was a very strong Eastern liberal presence in the Republican Party at that time. It was led by Governor Rockefeller of New York, okay? People used to call themselves or identify themselves as Rockefeller Republicans, and a Rockefeller Republican was a liberal Republican, okay? Well, in the Republican Convention of 1964, the Western delegates, particularly from behind the Orange Curtain here in California and in Arizona and Texas, they have what they call the Sagebrush Rebellion, where they basically place their people in strategic positions at the convention and basically seize control of the nomination process and they nominate a extraordinarily conservative Barry Goldwater. Okay. Now, when my father heard about this, he was overjoyed. He went all out for Goldwater in Long Island. He actually founded the Long Island Goldwater Republican Club. Okay, I mean, basically, if you look at Barry Goldwater, it's not so much what he was for, is what was he against. Okay. Did not like the federal income tax. See, that's how he won over my dad. Did not think that Social Security was the right way to go. Thought that the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, socialism. Thought that that a nuclear test ban showed us to be weak. Oh my God! Don't even get me started about this great society. Okay. He basically will say that what you should ought to have in an election is a choice, not an echo. Okay? And then one of my favorite pins, AUH2O. Come on, scientists. Okay? Okay? Anyway. His other slogan, in your heart you know he's right. You get that? You get it?
Yeah, that's awful.
Okay.
Wait, look at this.
Right, meaning correct, and
Oh
right
my
meaning
God.
conservative.
Why
Okay, got you see? And he will win over the heart, okay, of a Hollywood actor by the name of Ronald Reagan, who will go on a speaking tour on his behalf. Okay. So Johnson will basically attack Goldwater as being too extreme. He used to make a joke that he would bury us in the debris of World War III. Okay? Bury us. All right? These people are funny. Okay? All right. So, and I want you to now brace yourself for the most awesome attack ad ever. Okay, ready?
Wait.
Brace yourself.
I'm not ready.
Uh,
I got like 3 words left.
yeah.
Is it LBJ?
Give it.
Okay.
You'll see.
I'm so upset.
All right. Okay, ready?
Instead of the test match, you actually want to use some nuclear bombs on other countries?
It was that we need to keep testing because testing shows off that you have them. Okay, does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Okay, ready?
Oh my God, this is fun.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
Stop.
No, that's not that's my picture.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Or die.
Anybody top that, okay? Anyone, okay? So, hold a second.
It's so funny.
All right, so equal time. I have an awesome ad, and we can at least hear Goldwater defend himself for a minute. Okay, so listen, Barry Goldwater defend himself. That's Barry Goldwater. Okay, so listen.
Now, I don't seek the presidency to strip this nation of its defenses or to abandon the cause of freedom around the world. I seek the presidency so that this nation will be strong enough to deter war and determined enough to encourage freedom. I ask your help and the help of all Americans so that an American president can tell Nikita Khrushchev, "You are wrong. Our children will not live under communism. Your children will live under freedom."
Take that! You'll live under freedom if we have to bump them. All right, so,
Why can't we get good podcast like that?
okay. So, good times, he won his own state. Okay, but everybody, as much as a trampling this is, note something. Okay, well, no, Texas goes with Lyndon Johnson, that's his home state.
Oh, right.
But no, solid South-ish. Who are they voting for? Republican.
Time's okay.
No, this is the change.
You didn't want to vote for Lyndon Smart.
This,
They used to be the Democrats.
Yes! Okay. Here is your moment, people. Okay? This is the flip. Okay? This is why, in 1968, Nixon does the Southern strategy. He sees this. Republicans can win you. Get it? Okay. So, not only did Johnson win, but Goldwater scared the bejeebers out of so many people that the Democrats will win in Congress basically 2-1, okay? We will end up with 2/3 majorities for the Democrats in Congress. Good times like it back when it was under FDR. Okay? Maybe. Okay? But not my dad. Went down brilliantly. So in the 1965 State of the Union, what Johnson will say is, we have a unity of interest among our people that is unmatched in the history of freedom. He will then start passing bills at a breakneck pace, matched only by the 100 days. There's something for everybody, okay? We're going to fix our immigration system. He's going to pass the Immigration Act of 1965, which gets rid of the National Origins Act and its quotas. And it basically starts giving preferences to keeping families together. He's going to create the National Endowment for the Arts, okay, to protect the arts in the United States. He's going to create the National Endowment for the Humanities to protect our history. He is going to create
to go along with Social Security, we also need to make sure that people that are in retirement have health care. So he is going to create Medicare for seniors. To make sure that poor people get the same ability to start off in school that more wealthy children do, he creates Project Head Start, or free nursery school for children. And then taking the idea that Kennedy had used of a Peace Corps, where talents were spread around the world, Johnson says, you know where we need the talents? You know where we need people to help and volunteer? At home. People need to volunteer in their communities. So he creates the Vista Corps, which is essentially the Peace Corps for the USA. All right, so this is a sample, this is a taste, but you can't get what this guy is about. He wants to change everything. And he was extraordinarily popular while doing it. When polled, okay, in 1965, Johnson had a 74% approval rating, wait for it, among Republicans. Now, my dad would have been in that 26, scowling about his taxes, but it was the high tide. It was a high moment. Johnson will say, okay, I'm sick and tired of all the people who talk about the things we can't do. Hell, we're the richest country in the world, most powerful, we can do it all.
Jesus.
All right? So basically, you can all think of him as super liberal. Okay? All right? So,
Not as dramatic.
okay, so, yeah, but I don't want to lose the button. It's okay. Don't you see it's my spring shirt, you know, purple? Okay. But, all right, so, got it? So, super liberal. Okay. Probably don't need to get the whole quote down, but do you get, no, you want the quote.
Yep.
All right, you want the quote. Because it is an awesome quote. Pardon me?
No.
Yes, we are. But we're also the most in debt. So it's
Well,
like.
not the most. We have the greatest debt.
Yeah.
We have more debt than trees.
Oh yeah. We have vibrates. All right. So just some images. Signing Medicare. Okay. One of my favorite political cartoons, The War on Poverty, because I bet you did not know that the Capitol building is a transformer. All right. And that poverty is a giant bug. Okay. And okay, while his programs are in effect, poverty. Okay. Yeah, well, he ain't in charge anymore then. Okay. So basically, to wrap up this time, poverty rate will drop. 20% to about 13% under Johnson. It will drop another 2 ticks under Nixon. We'll fall all the way to about 11%, and then we'll go back up again. African American poverty was cut in half. Elderly and the poor both get health care through Medicare. While Great Society liberals will credit the Great Society for this, conservatives will argue, no, it was the economy. The economy was booming, and as it booms, trickle down. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, so growing up, there's always the great presidents,
Mhm.
and it's usually FDR and
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln. Why?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh,
Yeah, I've done this kind of on purpose. Yeah.
Were we dead at all?
Of course we're dead. Of course we're dead.
Why were we?
Okay. All right. So at this point, why don't y'all comment on JFK and LBJ? Comment. Okay. Their domestic policies, one known as the New Frontier, the other known as the Great Society. Comment. What's your comments? Okay, so just one comment. So how about from student 11? That would be the wrong period. Work it all, try as we might. Nahal, it'll not tell us a thing, this period. Okay, so, get one more moment.
Are you still sticking with the 11?
I am sticking with 11. Alright. So give me one moment to finish my numbering here. Okay. So, student 11, do you have a comment?
Well, yes, as future president, I do have a comment.
Okay.
I thought that JFK set in motion a lot, but he didn't complete it because of his death, and he was seen as more of an icon instead of like a doer and a shaker as Lyndon Baines Johnson was. I don't know. And with with all of the programs that Lyndon Baines Johnson set in place, domestic policy like was approved by more people and encouraged, and like I thought it was really interesting that 75% of Republicans were like, yeah, you can keep doing what you're doing, which was different, and it shifted in a big way.
Yes. Okay. So, student 24, Emma.
I said that they just were both good at like focusing on what needed to be done for the people in the country.
Okay. And student 26, Kate.
His legacy will a lot done, and Johnson is really
Okay. Awesome. So, thank you, RNG. So, and then there was this thing that changes everything. Okay? Okay, so then there was this thing that changes everything. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the nom. Okay? Vietnam. Okay? So, quick background. You should be sort of with this from having gone through that Cold War. Hopefully you've gone through those Cold War questions by now. Basically during World War II, the Vietnamese will help the United States in fighting World War II. They will fight alongside the United States against Japan. And when the war is over, the people in Vietnam kind of assumed, that now that Japan has been driven out, and since nobody else is like overruling them these days, that they were now a country. And so Ho Chi Minh is giving this great speech talking about Thomas Jefferson, American jets are flying over, and people thought it was all good. But the United States, in the post-war era, will support France reasserting its colonial control over French Indochina, which included Vietnam. Now, the reason for this goes back to Harry Truman and his Cold War-itis. Okay. Harry Truman wanted in NATO to rearm Germany and bring Germany into NATO. And France, hearing that Germany was going to get guns again, went, oh, I so don't think so. And so basically the United States says, okay, what can we do to make you smile and like having Germany with guns? And they said, we would like to have Vietnam. So basically we support the French colonial claim in exchange for France not objecting, and they could have blocked the rearming of Germany in NATO. Sir?
Did France have a when they're discussing the post-war and what they're doing with all of Europe, did France have a major say in what was going on?
They would have a say in NATO. NATO basically is an all-in thing because everybody, it basically in NATO, they do the pledge. Tack on one, tack on all. So therefore, they only let in people that they were willing to go to the mattresses for. And so everybody had to agree. So France could have said no, and Germany would not have been allowed into NATO.
So
in order to get,
they just
yes,
them with it.
yes, got it. All right. Anyway, well, given that the United States is supporting France, who the Vietnamese can decide to get help from? The communists, from Russia, and partly from China, though they're not truly fond of China. Anyway, by 1954, the United States is funding 80% of the French war. Gee, why? Because who are they fighting? Communists. So what effectively has happened here is a war that is just really truly an independence war turns into a commie war. However, in March of 1954, France is decisively defeated by Vietnam at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Okay. This will lead to peace accords in Geneva, and at Geneva, the United States will propose, you know what you ought to do? Let's divide Vietnam into two parts. Okay? Because that works so well. And we'll let kind of there to be kind of a French colonial side here in the South, because that's where the cities are, and they're accustomed to it. And we'll let we'll let Vietnam to be independent and communist in the North. There were supposed to be Vietnam-wide elections in 2 years. That did not happen. Instead, what the United States will do is start pouring money into supporting a South Vietnamese government under Dr. No. Oh, pardon me. Under No Dinh Diem. Okay. We even create a Southeast Asian version of NATO called CETA, or the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. Stop the commies. All right, so does everybody kind of get what happened here? Okay. And if you're trying to put names, this would be FDR and Truman. This would be Truman. This, okay, is Ike. Okay, so this financing of the war, the Geneva Peace Accord, the supporting of the government of No Dinh Diem. That's Ike. Yeah.
Why didn't America not only finance, why didn't they also fight?
At this point,
Yeah.
it's not a fight yet.
Oh.
At this point, it's an independence thing. Does that make sense? All right, so I keep this map just because it's the worst map ever. Okay, so that is China, not the ocean. That is the ocean. Okay? I know what it should have been, but that's why I call it the worst map ever. Okay.
It's hard to like
There's none in the
see.
map. There's none in the map.
Yeah.
Yes, there is, but I kept it because it's the worst map ever. It's endearing to me.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So quickly, what I'd like you to do is just kind of summarize American entry into the conflict. It's not a war yet. Actually, technically, never will be.
Makes me so mad. Oh, I'm meeting the photographer.
Who's it?
He's a famous photographer who shot Vietnam. And do you know that photograph? He's a famous photographer. Children who are so he shot
The Maycom
that.
shot?
Yeah. So, and he's in here. And I'm meeting him. That's awesome.
All right. So should I RNG it again?
No.
No. You just want to volunteer?
No.
Yes!
No.
Yes!
I'm conflicted.
You're
Is this a tips or is this like?
It's ish. Ish. Call it a tips.
Call it an ish.
Call it an ish. It's tips-ish. 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 All right, so we'll take a volunteer. Who thinks they can nutshell this for us? Yes.
Okay. So what I think is that the U.S. wanted to have Germany in NATO and rather have them as an ally than an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But France was against that, so they had to practically bribe them by saying, we'll help you with Vietnam. So at first they helped them out a little bit, then Russia got involved, so they started financing most of it. And I think later they started fighting with France and improved the war.
Okay, are we good? Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes. So now, ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam, the Kennedy years. When Kennedy becomes president of the United States, he inherits this Vietnam thing. And the situation is getting bad. In South Vietnam, there was a group of South Vietnamese communists who we will now call the Viet Cong. And so within South Vietnam, okay, the people basically in the countryside, as opposed to the city, were opposed to this domination by Diem. So they are starting an insurrection. They are starting to fight in the countryside. But it's not even very peaceful in the cities either, as protests, particularly among Buddhist monks, okay? Yes, protests among Buddhist monks, okay? And what the Buddhist monks will do is they will show their dissatisfaction with the regime of Diem by dousing themselves with gasoline, setting themselves out on fire, and jumping out windows. Point made. You can only do it once. Anyway. Okay.
What does it matter?
Okay. Well, Kennedy did not like something that Eisenhower had done with American defense. Under Eisenhower, we had adopted a policy of massive retaliation, which basically, the thought of it makes sense, but in practice, it didn't seem to be very flexible. What massive retaliation was is, whatever you do, my response shall be, nuke you. Okay? So if you do a tiny little thing to me, I nuke you. You do a big thing to me, I nuke you. If you do an outrageous thing to me, I nuke you. One size fits all. Nuke them. The problem, do you ever nuke anybody? So in other words, even though you have this mighty policy, if the thing you have to do is basically start blowing up the world, do you actually do it? No. So Kennedy says, don't like this policy. And so what he will propose is a new policy known as flexible response. Okay? And flexible response, we basically believe, is what helped get us into that quagmire, 50-cent word, known as Vietnam. What flexible response does is it gives the president an array of options, and what he can do is match the response based on the level of the crisis. And so, you do a little push to me, what can I do? A little push back. You do a bigger push to me, I can give a bigger push back. If you do a really big push, I can do a really big push back. Okay, so whatever the level of the crisis is, I can match it. Okay, but to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to dial back the spending on the nukes, and we're going to dial back up again the spending on conventional forces, and create special guerrilla fighting units. Okay, like the Green Berets and the Navy SEALs.
Like John.
Okay, so we can go in, hit, get out again, right? Well, does anybody see the flaw? So let me back this up. The flaw of massive retaliation is you can never do anything because it's nuclear. What's the flaw of flexible response? Say it loud, say it proud.
You always have to do something.
You always have to do something. If you always have the option, pretty much you always do it. And so basically what flexible response is, oh, I just have to. Okay? So you're always doing stuff. Got it? So, when Kennedy sees the problems developing in Vietnam, the first thing he does is he sends advisors to help foster stability. Now, oh wait, I did not properly introduce advisors to you. Everybody ready? Air quote. Advisors. Okay? Advisors. This is, I shall dress an advisor. I see an advisor before me, and the advisor is wearing a helmet. Okay? I see an advisor before me, and the advisor is wearing, a green uniform. I see the advisor before me, and the advisor is carrying an M14 automatic weapon. These advisors look strangely like soldiers.
Are they the same advisors as Walden too?
That's what we do. Okay, and so basically, this is the marching order of an advisor. You're not there to fight, but if someone shoots at you, shoot back. But under flexible response, if all of a sudden someone's shooting at you, you have to shoot back. And then what? You have to match that crisis, right? Anyway, by 1963, Kennedy imagines that maybe it'd be all better if he just simply got rid of no din diem. And so what ends up happening is the United States basically helps create a coup d'etat, in which the United States basically overthrows the government. Yeah?
So was Ho Chi Minh the leader of the North?
Ho Chi Minh is the leader of the North. Well, in the end, we do not know, nobody knows, what Kennedy would have actually ever done. What we do know is this. One of the last things he did before that day in Dallas is that he had sent an additional 15,000 troops to Vietnam. So if you were looking at this as a graph, what direction was American intervention going when Kennedy is killed? Up. A lot of people would say, had Kennedy lived, he would have gotten us out. Yeah, you can think that. The evidence is not necessarily there. So now, Vietnam, the Johnson years. So guess who now gets the hot potato? Okay. Ike passed it to Kennedy. Kennedy, okay. Okay. Well played, sir. Anyway, so Kennedy hands it off to Johnson, and it is under Johnson that an event takes place in August of 1964. An American ship, the USS Maddox, was fired upon. Now, word to President Johnson was that it was fired on both on August 2nd and on August 4th, 1964. We now know that there actually was never an August 4th attack, that it was a misread of a radar. But, given that the policy that you have inherited, because remember in 1964, he still is not president on his true own yet. He has basically inherited the Kennedy administration. All the people Kennedy wanted, Kennedy's people. Okay? And so, under the policy of flexible response, what do you have to do if you're fired upon? And so what Johnson does is he goes to Congress and he asks for an authorization of force. What that authorization was the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. That's where the attack took place. What this does is it basically gave President Johnson a blank check for use of force in Vietnam. There were no true limitations put in it. And so basically, with this authorization, the President of the United States had a free hand to do whatever he thought he ought to do in Vietnam. With me? Well, in 1965, the Viet Cong, that's the South Vietnamese communists, attack an American air base at Pleiku. Johnson responds. He will, A, increase our troop levels, and by the end of 1965, we now have 184,000 troops in Vietnam. And B, he will order bombing attacks on North Vietnam. It was called Operation Rolling Thunder. Now, one of the things the United States had developed by this time was a new bomber known as the B-52. What could the B-52 do? It could carry so many bombs that it could basically lay down bombs like somebody rolled out carpet. In fact, that's what they called it, carpet bombing. And so in a wave of destruction behind these things, it just blows the living daylights out of everything. We thought that the communist government in the North, there's no way, they'll just, don't stop bombing us, whatever you want. Turned out that bombing the living daylights out of North Vietnam had the opposite effect of what we thought it would. Basically, it strengthened their will to keep fighting and perhaps even up their fighting to bring it to a true level of a war. So, Lana, there was a question you were asking me earlier. Got it. So, what starts to happen in 1965 is you start to get a debate in the American public Some people say that we need to get out of this war before it gets any worse. Other people had bought into this idea known as the domino theory. And what the belief was is that if you allow communism to happen in place A, it will fall over like a domino, and all of a sudden place B will go commie, and place C will be commie, and then what will end up happening is commies will be walking around on Waikiki Beach. By 1967, the Vietnam War was already costing the United States about $27 billion a year.
Is that that time money?
Yes, that time money. Okay. The Vietnam War will help increase our deficit, along with our Great Society spending, to $23 billion a year. Okay. The excessive spending on both the war and the Great Society triggers inflation. It will trigger an inflation crisis that will eventually envelope the United States in the 1970s to the point that the mortgage my mom was paying on our house was a 17% mortgage. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know mortgage rates, but I now have my house, I've mortgaged my house at 3.5%. My mom was paying 18%. And the reason why you have to have that high of an interest rate is because money is becoming, in effect, worthless. Yes, sir?
At this point, when the U.S., when a lot of people wanted to pull out, and others thought it was a weakness,
Yeah.
Was France still fighting, or did they?
They're gone. At the Geneva Peace Accords, they're gone.
So
It's our,
could they
it's
make
our,
the
it's
argument?
our thing now.
So could they make the argument, we were only here for France, and now they
You
did
could,
what we can do?
but we didn't. And now it's about commies. Yeah.
I thought that NATO, one of the reasons why everyone joined NATO was if you were in war, everyone would join you.
There was a defense pact in Europe. Is anybody being attacked in Europe? And then soon, the news out of the war, well, it didn't look so pretty for the United States. You see, in our new era of media, news reporters basically just went wherever they wanted with their little cameras. And so they could basically just follow around a military unit, you know, and just see exactly what they did. Well, basically what ends up happening is on August 5th, 1965, they get caught. The United States military, a group of American Marines will basically torch a Vietnamese village known as Cam Ni. They even had a term for it. They called it a Zippo raid. Take your lighter. Okay. So as early as 1965, you start to see the very first actual resistance. So remember, we've been given lessons on how to protest things, haven't we? Okay. The civil rights movement has said this is what you do if you want to change things. And so what people start doing is sit-ins, okay, regarding the war. People start saying, hell no, I won't go. And rather than allow themselves to be drafted, they go off and hang out in Canada. And sometimes you would just have a big party where everybody comes in and you have a trash can fire and everybody starts throwing their draft cards in. In the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, they will start now openly criticizing our Vietnam War policy. What was that 74% I was talking about before? From the height of the low to the end of the show. And the thing is, Johnson knew it. He was oft quoted about what Vietnam was doing to this great society. Communism. The fear of communism. Okay? I mean, so just go back to the terrifying thing that had been kind of set up by Truman of stopping the expansion of communism in the world. And the fact that Ike was pouring so much money into it, okay, that Kennedy started a coup. Communism. In 1962, an organization was created on college campuses known as the Students for a Democratic Society. One of the leaders of this movement, the Students for a Democratic Society, is a guy by the name of Tom Hayden. Okay, he's one of Jane Fonda's earlier husbands. Okay, the Students for a Democratic Society are going to pass in Port Huron, Michigan, something known as the Port Huron Statement. What they were demanding were student rights. Okay, that students should ought to have a voice on college campuses and eventually high school campuses. So, any sort of real voice that students have today, probably owe very much to the Students for a Democratic Society. But Students for Democratic Society are also going to, in their Port Huron statement, going to put out a state of beliefs. And what that state of beliefs included was that individuals should be able to share in decisions determining the quality and the directions of their lives. That's code. Can anyone figure out what it is code for? It's an anti-something statement. It's not an anti-Vietnam statement, but it's close. If you got drafted, if you get drafted, are you sharing in a decision determining the quality and direction of your life? No. No, you're not. Because the government just said you have to go fight somewhere. That's an anti-draft statement. Okay? So, very early on, students were basically saying that they are opposed to the draft because it takes away from their lives. Well, in 1964, as politics in the United States were getting a little bit more, kind of out there, students started demonstrating at University of California, Berkeley. The administration responded by saying that that students were not allowed, okay, to do any sort of political activity on campus. Well, that launches what we call the free speech movement, where Berkeley students just go crazy nuts, okay, demanding that they have the right to free speech. When Vietnam becomes truly a thing in 1965, the Students for Democratic Society will be among those that are most vehemently opposed to the war. Radical SDS members would form organizations such as the Weather Underground. Weather Underground will protest the war in a violent fashion by attempting to blow up police cars. Now, in closing, what I want to talk about, however, is that during the election of 2008, there was this woman that was running for vice president that would accuse the eventual president of the United States with palling around, okay, with terrorists. And that is because the place where Barack Obama launched his campaign for the presidency, he did at the home of Bill Ayers, who was a member of the Weather Underground. You're welcome. And I came up 2 slides short, blaming Mr. Rutherford. Yes, there is.
You want Arizona? I'm gonna go over there.
They just like read your papers and just like, okay.
Keep everyone happy.
I'm not sure what
Are you